When I first met Daniel Chen, I thought he was going to be the worst roommate imaginable. It was move-in day at Commonwealth University, and I'd arrived at our dorm room to find one side already claimed with military precision. His bed was made. With hospital corners, textbooks were arranged by subject and size, and there was literally a label maker sitting on his desk like some kind of organizational trophy. Meanwhile, I was standing there with my mom, holding a garbage bag full of wrinkled clothes and a poster of the neighborhood that I'd impulse bought at Target. My name is Marcus Williams. I'm from a small town in Ohio where being different meant keeping your head down, and I was absolutely terrified of my first semester at college. Not because of the classes or being away from home, but because for the first time in my life, I was going to have to share a 12 by 14-foot room with another human being who might eventually figure out that I'm gay. Back home, I'd gotten really good at being invisible. I played baseball because that's what boys did. I dated Sarah Morrison for 6 months, it's junior year, and felt guilty the entire time because she was actually really nice and deserved someone who could feel what they are. We're supposed to feel. I laughed at the jokes I was supposed to laugh at, stayed quiet when I was supposed to stay quiet, and counted down the days until I could leave for somewhere bigger. Somewhere I could maybe, possibly, eventually be myself. So there I was, staring at Daniel's perfectly organized side of the room, and my first thought was that this guy probably had everything figured out. He probably had a girlfriend already. He probably played intramural sports and would want to throw parties in our room and bring people over who would ask me uncomfortable questions about why I never talked about girls. Daniel walked in about 20 minutes after my mom left. He was carrying a plastic storage container filled with what appeared to be different types of tea, which should have been my first clue that maybe I'd misjudged the situation. He was shorter than me by a couple inches, with dark hair that fell across his forehead and these intense brown eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a navy blue polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts, and I remember thinking he looked like he was dressed for a country club mixer, not college move-in day. "You must be Marcus," he said, extending his hand in this weirdly formal way. "I'm Daniel. I organized the left side since I got here first, but if you have a preference for desk positioning or lighting, we can negotiate." I shook his hand, completely. Thrown off by how serious he was. "No, it's cool. I'm pretty easygoing." "Good to know," he said, making what I swear was an actual mental note. "I'm pre-med, so I'll probably be studying a lot. Not really into parties or having people over constantly. I go to bed around 11 on weeknights, earlier during exam weeks. I assume we should establish some basic ground rules about guests, cleaning schedules, and noise levels." And just like that, Daniel pulled out an actual typed document titled Roommate Expectations and Shared Space Agreement from his bag. I'm not kidding, it had sections. It had bullet points. It had a signature line at the bottom, looking back. Now, I can laugh about it, but in that moment, I was genuinely wondering if I could request a room. Transfer before classes even started. The first few weeks were exactly as awkward as you'd expect. Daniel studied constantly, and I mean constantly. He had this routine where he'd come back from classes, he'd change into different clothes that were essentially identical to his class clothes, make himself a cup of green tea using a specific timer for steeping, and then study for exactly 50 minutes followed by a 10-minute break. During his breaks, he'd do these weird stretches, or sometimes just stand at the window, staring out at the quad like he was meditating or plotting world domination. I honestly couldn't tell which. I tried to stay out of his way mostly. I'd go to the library to study, hang out in the common room, take really long walks around campus while listening to music and trying to figure out who I wanted to be in this new place. I'd see other students who seemed so comfortable already, laughing in groups, wearing pride pins on their backpacks, holding hands with people they'd just met. I felt like I was watching life happen through a window I didn't know how to open. One night, about 3 weeks into the semester, I came back to the room later than usual. I'd been at the library and lost track of time, and when I opened the door, I found Daniel sitting on his bed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, which was shocking in itself because I'd never seen him in anything remotely casual. But what really stopped me was that he was crying. Not dramatically, but quiet tears were definitely running down his face, and he was staring at his laptop screen with this expression of complete devastation. Sorry, I said immediately, starting to back out of the room. I can come back later. No, it's fine, he said, quickly closing the laptop and wiping his face with the back of his hand. This is your room too. I'm fine. He was very clearly not fine, but I wasn't sure what the protocol was here. We barely knew each other. We'd barely had conversations beyond, I'm going to the dining hall, or do you mind if I open the window? But something about seeing him like that, seeing the perfectionist control freak roommate actually being human for the first time, made me stay. Do you want to talk about it? I asked, surprising myself. Daniel looked at me for a long moment, like he was calculating something. Then he said, do you have anyone back home? It's like a girlfriend or someone you miss? God. The question caught me completely off guard. My stomach dropped in that familiar way it always did when someone got anywhere near the topic of my non-existent romantic life? No, I said carefully. No girlfriend. Why? I had a boyfriend, Daniel said. So quietly, I almost wasn't sure I'd heard him right. Had past tense. I just got an email from him saying he's seeing someone else at his school and thinks we should officially call it over? The room seemed to tilt slightly. Daniel was gay. My uptight, organized, definitely had his life together roommate was gay and was casually telling me about his boyfriend like it was the most normal thing in the world. I'm sorry, I managed to say. That really sucks. We were together for 2 years, Daniel continued, and now that he'd started talking, it was like something had broken open. We were in debate club together in high school. He was my first everything. First person I came out to. First kiss. First relationship. We had this whole plan about doing long distance, visiting each other, making it work. And I've been trying so hard, calling him every night, scheduling video chats around both our classes. And apparently he's been pulling away for weeks. And I was too focused on keeping my GPA perfect to notice. I sat down on my own bed facing him. That's not your fault, man. If he was feeling differently, he should have said something. Should he, though? Daniel asked, and there was this edge of bitterness I'd never heard from him before. Why not? Exactly easy to talk to. I know what people think of me. I'm uptight, I'm controlling. Make roommate agreements with bullet points. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. I thought if I could be perfect enough, plan everything well, enough control all the variables, then nothing bad would happen. But you can't control other people's feelings, turns out. We sat there in silence for a minute, and I was having this intense internal debate about what to say next. This was the moment. This was the opportunity I'd been theoretically waiting. For since I got to college, the chance to tell someone the truth about myself. But it was terrifying because once you say it out loud, you can't take it back. And what if Daniel was upset I hadn't mentioned it before? What if he felt like I'd been lying to him? What if everything got weird? I'm gay too, I blurted out, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I've never had a boyfriend or anything. I've never even really told anyone before. Well, I told my best friend back home right before I left, but that's it. So I don't know if that helps or makes this weirder or what, but I just thought you should know that you're not, alone in that aspect of the roommate situation. Daniel stared at me for a second, then started laughing. Real laughing. The kind that caught him by surprise and made him wipe at his eyes again. Though this time it seemed like maybe good tears mixed with the sad ones. Are you serious right now? Fortunately, yes, I said, feeling my face get hot. Why, unfortunately? Because I'm apparently very bad at this whole coming out thing and just made it about me when you're the one going through a breakup. No, Daniel said, shaking his head. No, this is actually perfect. Do you know how terrified I was that you were going to be some homophobic jock who'd request a room transfer the second you found out? You're so tall, and you mentioned playing baseball, and I saw you had that sports equipment bag, and I just assumed that I was straight. I finished. Yeah, I get that a lot. Turns out gay people can also be mediocre at sports. Daniel smiled. A real smile this time. I'm sorry for assuming. That was unfair. I'm sorry your boyfriend is an idiot, I said. You seem like you were a really good boyfriend. The organized thing could definitely be an asset in a relationship. Like you'd never forget an anniversary. I had them all in my calendar with reminder alerts, Daniel said. 2 weeks before, 1 week before, 3 days before, and day of. See? That's commitment. Something shifted between us that night. Daniel made us both tea, which I'd never really been into but didn't have the heart to refuse. And we stayed up until almost 3 in the morning just talking. He told me about growing up in San Francisco with parents who were supportive but had very high expectations. About how being gay was accepted but being anything less than exceptional wasn't. About how his ex-boyfriend Kevin had been the first person who made him feel like he could be both smart and happy at the same time. I told him about Ohio, about Sarah Morrison and the guilt, about feeling invisible for so many years that I wasn't sure who I actually was underneath all the hiding. "Do you want to figure it out?" Daniel asked. "Who you are, I mean? Now that you're here?" "I think so," I said. "But I have no idea how to start." "Well," Daniel said, adjusting his glasses in this thoughtful way that I was starting to recognize. Meant he was forming a plan. What if we figured it out together? Not like in a weird way, but we're both starting over here. You could go to the LGBTQ student center. Actually attend events instead of just walking past the rainbow flags and pretending we have somewhere else to be. I laughed because that was exactly what I'd been doing. "Is that what you've been doing too?" "Every single day," Daniel admitted. I walk past. I see the posters about coffee socials and game nights, and I think I should go in there. And then I don't. Because what if Kevin finds out through social media that I'm already moving on? Or what if I don't fit in? Or what if we just went together, I interrupted. Like safety in numbers or whatever? Moral support? Daniel nodded slowly. "Okay. Yeah, let's do that." The next Friday, we went to our first LGBTQ Student Center event together. It was advertised as a casual game night, and I was expecting maybe 10 or 15 people maximum. There were at least 50 students crammed into the space, playing board games and card games, laughing and talking, and representing every variation of queer identity you could imagine. Daniel and I stood in the doorway for a solid 3 minutes. "Before anyone noticed us, we can leave," I whispered. "No," Daniel whispered back. "We made an agreement to do this." "I'm not backing out of an agreement." "You and your agreements," I muttered, but I followed him inside. We ended up playing Cards Against Humanity with a group of juniors and seniors who immediately adopted us like we were lost puppies. There was Jasmine, who had purple hair and wore a leather jacket, covered in pins and patches. There was Trevor, who was studying theater and spoke almost entirely in musical references. There was Aisha, who was quiet but had this way of making the most devastatingly funny card plays when you least expected it. And there was Cameron, who was tall and athletic and confident in a way that made me both intimidated and weirdly hopeful, because here was proof that you could be gay and take up space in the world. "First time here?" Cameron asked during a break between rounds. "That obvious?" I said. "You both have that deer in headlights look," he said with a grin. "Don't worry, it wears off. Give it a few weeks and you'll be running events yourself." "I highly doubt that," Daniel said. "I'm not really a run events kind of person." "Famous last words," Jasmine called from across the table. "That's what I said last year. Now I'm the social coordinator." We started going every week, sometimes 2 game nights, sometimes 2 movie screenings, sometimes just to study sessions where everyone worked on homework together in comfortable silence. Daniel started to relax in ways I hadn't seen before. He still studied constantly, but he'd also join impromptu trips to get late-night food, or stay up debating philosophy with Trevor, or help Jasmine plan Pride Month events. I watched him slowly let go of some of that rigid control he'd wrapped around himself, saw him laugh more easily, saw him exist as a whole person instead of just a GPA and a schedule. And I started to figure out who I was, too. I joined the intramural soccer league that Cameron ran, even though I'd always said I was a baseball person. Turns out I was actually pretty good at soccer, and more importantly, I had fun. I started going to open mic nights at the student center and discovered I actually loved poetry, both reading it and eventually, nervously, performing some of my own. I let myself have a crush on a guy in my English class, and even though nothing came of it, just allowing myself to feel it without shame was huge. Daniel and I fell into this comfortable rhythm as roommates and friends. We'd grab breakfast together before morning classes, meet up for dinner at the dining hall, spend evenings studying with occasional breaks where we'd share music or videos, or just complain about difficult professors. He introduced me to Korean dramas, which I pretended to think were cheesy but secretly got completely invested in. I introduced him to basketball, teaching him the rules during March Madness, and discovering he was possibly the most competitive person alive once he understood how the game worked. About 2 months after that first conversation, Daniel got invited to a party by some people from his organic chemistry study group. He spent 20 minutes debating whether or not to go, literally making a pros and cons list until I finally said, "Dude, it's just a party. If it sucks, we leave. If it's fun, we stay. Stop overthinking." He asked, "You want to come?" "I'm not letting you go to your first college party alone," I said. "Who knows what kind of questionable decisions you might make without supervision." "I don't make questionable decisions," Daniel protested. "You organized your tea collection by caffeine content and flavor profile," I pointed out. "That's a perfectly logical system." The party was exactly what you'd expect from a college party. It's too many people, too loud music, questionable decisions being made in every corner. Daniel looked overwhelmed immediately, and I was about to suggest we bail when Cameron appeared. Out of nowhere, Marcus. "Daniel, you guys made it." He was clearly several drinks in and radiating enthusiasm. "Come on, I'll introduce you to people." The next hour was a blur of meeting people whose names I immediately forgot, declining drinks I didn't want, trying to have conversations while shouting over music that was way too loud. Daniel stuck close to me the whole time, and I could tell he was not having a good time. He finally escaped to the backyard, which was quieter and less crowded. There were string lights hung between trees and a few people sitting around talking in smaller groups. "Sorry," Daniel said, once we found a relatively quiet corner. "I'm not good at this." "Neither am I admitted. I've been to exactly 2 parties in my entire life, and one of them was my cousin's bar mitzvah." Daniel laughed. "At least you have an excuse." "I'm just socially incompetent." "You're not socially incompetent. You're just selective about your social settings." "That's a nice way of saying I have no idea how to have fun," Daniel said. He sat down on the grass, leaning back against a tree, and I sat down next to him. "You have fun at game nights," I pointed out. "That's different. That's structured. There are rules and objectives and a clear endpoint. Life doesn't always have structure and rules," I said. "Sometimes you just have to improvise. I'm terrible at improvising." We sat there quietly for a minute, and I was very aware of how close we were sitting, shoulders almost touching. It was one of those perfect early autumn nights where the temperature was exactly right and the air smelled like leaves and possibility. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said. "Sure. You ever feel like you're doing this wrong? Like everyone else got a manual on how to be gay and confident in yourself and somehow you missed the distribution?" I turned to look at him, and he was staring up at the string lights with this expression that was trying to be neutral but couldn't quite hide the vulnerability underneath. "Every single day," I said honestly. "But I think maybe that's normal. Like, we spent so many years hiding and pretending that figuring out how to not do that is actually really hard." "I thought coming to college would be this fresh start," Daniel said. "I thought I'd be more confident, more open, more myself. But I'm still just as scared as I was in high school, maybe more, because now I don't have Kevin as an excuse not to put myself out there." "You're putting yourself out there," I said. "You go to the student center. You came to this party. You're literally sitting here having an honest conversation about your feelings instead of pretending everything is fine." "I guess," Daniel said. "Just feels like everyone else is so much further ahead. Cameron's so confident. Trevor's so outgoing. Even you seem like you're figuring things out faster than me." "Are you kidding?" I said. "Daniel, I've watched. You become friends with people. I've seen you volunteer to help with events. I've literally heard you laugh more in the last 2 months than probably your entire life before that. You're doing amazing. You think so?" "I know so. And for what it's worth, you've helped me too. I don't think I would have gone to the student center at all if you hadn't agreed to come with me that first time. I definitely wouldn't have kept going back." Daniel turned to look at me then, and we were really close. Close enough that I could see the way the string lights reflected in his eyes, close enough that I became suddenly hyper-aware of every point, where our bodies were almost, but not quite touching. "Marcus," he said quietly. "Yeah, I'm really glad you're my roommate. even though I'm a disaster who doesn't label anything and leaves my side of the room chaotic. Especially because of that, he said, smiling. You balance me out. You make me less rigid. You make me feel like it's okay to not have everything figured out. Something was happening in that moment, something that made my heart race and my palms sweat and every nerve ending feel electric. Daniel was looking at me in a way that felt different from how he'd looked at me before, and I was suddenly very conscious of the fact that I wanted to kiss him, which was both thrilling and terrifying, because this was my roommate, this was my friend, this was someone who actually understood me, and what if I was reading this completely wrong and ruined everything? We should probably head back inside, I said, chickening out completely. Or we could just go home, Daniel said. This party is kind of terrible. Agreed. We walked back to the dorm in comfortable silence, but something had shifted, and we both knew it. The air felt different between us, charged with something unspoken. When we got back to the room, we went through our usual nighttime routines. But everything felt heightened somehow. I was aware of Daniel changing into his sleep clothes on his side of the room in a way I never had been before. I was aware of the sound of him brushing his teeth in the bathroom. I was aware of him climbing into his bed and saying goodnight and turning off his light while I was still pretending to read on my phone. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with questions and possibilities and fears. What did that moment mean? Was I imagining things? Did Daniel feel it too? Or was I projecting my own feelings onto a situation that was just two friends having a vulnerable conversation? By the time morning came, I'd convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing, but then things kept happening that made me question that conclusion. Daniel started finding excuses to touch me casually, a hand on my shoulder when he was laughing at something I said, sitting close enough that our knees touched when we studied together at coffee shops, brushing hair out of my face one time when we were walking back from dinner and the wind was being ridiculous. He started texting me throughout the day, not just logistical stuff, but random thoughts and memes and inside jokes from the friend group we'd developed. He started asking my opinion on things, what he should wear to events, what he should do, about conflicts with his lab partner, whether he should switch to a different pre-med track that interested him more but was considered less prestigious. And I found myself doing the same thing. Seeking out his company more intentionally, suggesting we grab meals together, asking if he wanted to come study in the library even when I didn't really need to study, finding reasons to make him smile. Because I'd become maybe slightly addicted to the way his whole face changed when he was genuinely happy. Our friends started to notice. Trevor made a comment about how we were joined at the hip, and Jasmine started referring to us as the twins even though we looked nothing alike. Cameron pulled me aside one day after soccer practice and said, "So, are you and Daniel together, or what?" "What? No, we're roommates. We're friends." "Uh-huh," Cameron said, clearly not believing me. "And I'm straight." "We're not together," I insisted. "Does he know that?" Cameron asked. "Because from where everyone else is standing, you two are basically already dating. You just haven't made it official." That conversation haunted me for days. Were we basically dating? We spent almost all our free time together. We knew each other's schedules and habits and preferences. We had inside jokes and shared looks and could have entire conversations without speaking. Daniel had started keeping my favorite snacks in his organized food storage. I had started learning how to make tea properly because I knew it made him happy. We'd started watching shows together before bed, him in his bed and me in mine, laptops out, counting down to press play at the same time. One night, about a week after Cameron's comment, we were doing exactly that. I was watching the latest episode of the Korean drama we'd gotten invested in when the episode ended on a major cliffhanger. "No," Daniel shouted at his laptop. "Can't end it there. That's cruel." I was laughing at his outrage when he looked over at me from his bed. And just like that, we were having another one of those moments. "Marcus," he said. "Yeah, can I come over there?" My heart started pounding. "To my bed?" "Yeah, I want to be closer. Is that weird?" "No," I said, my voice coming out scratchy. "It's not weird." Daniel got up and crossed the small space between our beds, and I moved over to make room. He climbed in next to me, and we were pressed together in my narrow dorm bed, sharing my laptop screen. He smelled like his tea and laundry detergent, and something that was just Daniel, and I could feel the warmth of him all along my side. "This okay?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I managed to say. "This is okay." We made it through maybe 10 minutes of the next episode before I completely lost the ability to focus on what was happening on screen. All I could think about was how close Daniel was, how I could feel him breathing, how he'd rested his head slightly against my shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I can't concentrate," Daniel said suddenly. "Me neither," I admitted. "I'm not even watching anymore. I'm just thinking about how you're right here and how I don't want to do anything to mess this up, but also how I really want to kiss you and have for weeks now, and I'm sorry if that's not what you want to hear." The confession came out in a rush. No filter, no careful planning, just honesty. Daniel turned to look at me, and we were so close now that I could count his eyelashes. "If I wanted to, you want to kiss me?" he asked. "So much," I said. "I know we're roommates, and that could make things complicated, and we have this whole friend group now, and I don't want to ruin any of that. But I can't stop thinking about you, and I don't know what to do with that." "You could kiss me, Daniel?" said simply. "That would be a start. Yeah, please." So I kissed him, at first tentative, giving him every opportunity to change his mind. But he kissed me back, his hand coming up to cup my face, and then it wasn't tentative anymore. It was everything I'd imagined, and nothing like I'd imagined all at once. It was perfect and messy, and when we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. "I've wanted to do that since the party," Daniel said. "The one where we sat outside?" "Yes, you looked so perfect in that light, and you were saying all these nice things about me, and I almost kissed you then, but I chickened out." "I wanted you to," I admitted. "I've been going crazy trying to figure out if I was imagining the way you were looking at me." "You weren't imagining it," Daniel said. "I'm terrible at hiding what I'm feeling, apparently. Everyone could tell. Except you. I'm oblivious," I said. Cameron had to literally spell it out for me. Daniel laughed and kissed me again, and then we were making out in my narrow dorm bed, like the cliché college students we were. And it was honestly the best night of my life up to that point. When we finally stopped to breathe, Daniel said, "So, what does this mean? Are we dating now? Do we need to have a defining the relationship conversation? Should I make a document?" "Please don't make a document," I said, laughing. "But yes, I would like to date you if you'd like to date me." "I would like that very much," Daniel said formally, and then ruined the formality by grinning like an idiot. "Although this does present some logistical challenges given that we share a 12 by 14 foot space, we'll figure it out." I said, "We're good at figuring things out together." And we did figure it out. It wasn't always easy. Dating your roommate means you have zero space when you need it. Means every disagreement happens in the same room where you sleep. Means your entire relationship is on display for your R and everyone else on your floor. We had to establish new boundaries, have conversations about what we were comfortable with other people knowing. Figure out how to be roommates and boyfriends simultaneously. But we also got to fall asleep together every night and wake up together. Every morning, we got to study together and eat together and exist in each other's space in this intimate way that long-distance couples don't get. We got to learn each other completely, all the annoying habits and weird quirks and vulnerable moments. Daniel learned that I'm grumpy in the mornings until I've had coffee, that I stress clean when I'm anxious about tests, that I cry during emotional movie scenes but try to hide it. I learned that Daniel talks in his sleep sometimes, that he needs exactly 8 hours to function, but will sacrifice sleep to help friends, that he's actually incredibly goofy once he feels safe enough to let his guard down. Our friend group was thrilled when we finally told them we were together, with Trevor claiming he'd called it from week 1 and Jasmine demanding to know why we'd waited so long to figure out what was obvious to everyone else. My parents were harder. I came out to them over winter break, sitting in our living room in Ohio, Daniel waiting in my childhood bedroom for moral support. My mom cried. Not because she was upset, but because she said she'd known something was weighing on me, and she was glad I felt safe enough to tell them. My dad was quiet for a long time, then asked if I was happy. When I said yes, he said that's all that mattered to him. They wanted to meet Daniel properly, not as my roommate, but as my boyfriend, and watching him charm. My parents, with his politeness and his genuine interest in their lives and his clear careful was maybe when I realized I was falling in love with him. Daniel's parents were supportive but concerned about how being in a relationship would affect his grades, which was very on brand for them. He had to assure them multiple times that dating me hadn't tanked his GPA, and I had. To promise his mother that I wouldn't distract him during finals week, which we both knew was a lie because we'd absolutely be distracting each other. We spent the rest of freshman year figuring out how to be us. We had our first fight about cleaning schedules and made up within hours because neither of us could stand the tension. We celebrated our first official anniversary by going to the same spot outside where we'd sat during that party. Daniel gave me a journal for writing poetry, and I gave him a label maker in pride flag colors as a joke gift that he genuinely loved. We studied together, went to student center events together, occasionally went to terrible parties together, where we'd last 20 minutes before escaping to get late-night food instead. Summer was hard. We both went home, 3 states apart, and had to figure out long distance for 3 months. We video chatted every night, fell asleep on calls, sent each other care packages and playlists and long texts about nothing and everything. Daniel got an internship at a research lab and would tell me about his work with such enthusiasm that I'd just watch his face light up and feel grateful that I got to be the person he shared this with. I worked at a local recreation center teaching baseball to kids and discovered I actually liked coaching, liked helping younger kids feel confident in their abilities. We counted down the days until sophomore year, when we'd requested to room together again, this time intentionally, this time as the couple everyone knew us to be. When we finally saw each other again at the start of sophomore year, Daniel literally ran across the parking lot and jumped into my arms. And I spun him around like we were in a movie, and it was cheesy and perfect and us. Our friends cheered, and we were home. That was 3 years ago now. We're seniors, still roommates, still together, still figuring things out, but doing it side by side. Daniel got into medical school, 3 different programs actually, and he's trying to decide between them. I'm applying to graduate programs for creative writing and education, thinking I might want to teach, might want to help other kids find their voices the way I found mine. We still go to the student center, though now we're the older students. Welcoming the scared freshmen who hover in doorways, we tell them it gets easier. We tell them they'll find their people. We tell them it's okay to not have everything figured out. Cameron graduated last year and sends us updates from his life. In Seattle, Trevor's performing in showcases and already has an agent interested in representing him. Jasmine's planning to propose to her girlfriend this spring. Aisha's in law school and says she's going to change the world, and we believe her. Sometimes I think about that first night, Daniel crying over his laptop, me standing in the doorway, not knowing if I should stay or go. I think about how we were both so scared, so convinced we had to be perfect or invisible or something other than what we were. I think about the roommate agreement with its bullet points and signature lines, and how we've revised it a dozen times to accommodate growth and change, and the reality that life doesn't fit neatly into organized categories. I think about all the small moments that added up to this, all the conversations and touches and inside jokes and vulnerable confessions. Last week, Daniel asked me what I wanted to do after graduation, really do, if I could do anything. We were in our room, same space we've shared for 4 years now, though we'd upgraded to a slightly larger double this year and pushed our beds together to make one bigger sleeping space. I want to be with you, I said. Whatever else happens, wherever we end up, I want that to be part of the equation. Me too, Daniel said. I know it's going to be complicated with medical school and your programs probably being in different cities, but I want to figure it out. We're good at figuring things out together, we are, I agreed. Even if you do still make too many labeled lists. Even if you still leave your clothes in chaotic piles, he countered. I love you, I said, because I could now, because we'd built something real and solid in hours. I love you too, Daniel said. Thank you for staying that night. When you walked in and I was crying, and you could have just left. Thank you for telling me the truth, I said. For being the first person I came out to who really got it. We kissed, comfortable and familiar and still exciting after all this time. Outside our window, students were walking across campus, some of them probably feeling the same way we did that first semester. Scared and hopeful and not sure where they fit, I hoped they'd find their people the way we found ours. Find the courage to be honest. I hoped they'd find someone who made them want to stay instead of run. And I hoped they'd learn what we'd learned, that life doesn't come with instruction manuals or guaranteed outcomes. That being yourself is terrifying and necessary. That love shows up in unexpected places, like organized roommates with tea collections and label makers. That sometimes the best things happen when you stop trying to control everything and just let yourself be vulnerable with another person. We didn't have everything figured out. We probably never would. But we had each other, and we had our people. And we had this life we were building together, one honest conversation at a time. And that felt like more than enough. Felt like everything.